All right, well, welcome, and I want to talk about the real Noah. Um, Russell Crowe is starring in a new movie that's coming out soon about the prophet Noah. And Noah is a real person who really lived. And, movies, Hollywood takes a certain poetic license with the way that they film. And so I want to take a look at the real Noah. Um, I want to give the background to Noah. Noah was born in a time called the antediluvian period. And at this point in human history, men were living a lot older than we are now. You look at Genesis chapter 5, and a lot of the people were living well over 800 years old. A lot of them in their 900s. Methuselah is the oldest recorded. And I want to emphasize that he's the oldest recorded. We don't know that Methuselah is the oldest person who ever lived, but he's the oldest recorded person who ever lived. And the world was very different in those days, obviously. I mean, if people are living longer like that, then something's different. So scientists believe that in the antediluvian period, that means before the flood, before the deluge of Noah, there was a canopy. This canopy was above the earth, and this was a canopy of water that deflected a lot of the UV light that comes into the earth. And that UV light is what is so destructive to our bodies that make it so hard for us to live long lives these days. But for the interested here on the antediluvian period, I'll have to refer you to other resources. Dr. Kent Hovind's got some great resources on the antediluvian period, and I would really encourage you to check those out to get more on the canopy theory. But I want to get back to Noah. I want to talk about who Noah is. In the movie, he's kind of a middle-aged man, and he's got a son and a daughter, and they're kind of young kids. And he's fighting with a community of people who are trying to get on the ark once they realize that it's not going to be good for the earth with this new thing called rain. You see, before the flood, there was no such thing as rain. God didn't have rain coming down from the heavens. The physics just weren't there for it yet. And so that's why it didn't rain yet, because the physics just weren't there yet. And physics really is just the sustainable miracles that God continues with, the natural laws that we can all measure and test and see. All these things are just sustained miracles that would be completely impossible without the power of God to sustain the laws, to sustain the phenomena that we see around the world. But I want to get into the text so that we can see who the real Noah is. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, it explains, "When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, 'My spirit will not contend with humans forever. They are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. Many biblical scholars believe that phrase, 120 years, is not referring to the lifespan of a person, but is a prophecy that, okay, in 120 years from the issuing of this decree, there is going to be a flood. Continuing on in verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. And we get some of this in some of the ancient Greek myths. You've got Hercules, and you've got all these other great men of old who did wondrous things by our standards. And this is why they were able to do all these things of renown. Verse 5. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. It's interesting that this is the reason why God's going to destroy the earth, because of our thoughts. You know, a lot of us think that, okay, we're basically good people. You know, we haven't murdered, we haven't killed anybody. But verse 5 in Genesis chapter 6 is saying that God is going to destroy the world because of the thoughts of man. Because the thoughts of man are evil. You know, Romans 14:12 says that each of us is going to have to give an account to God one day. And for those of us who are saved, who know Jesus Christ, who know the forgiveness that is available to us because of the cross, this isn't a scary thing really, but it's something that we look forward to. And I'll be happy to explain a lot more about that later. Right now I want to get back to the text. So, the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. In verse 6 of chapter 6, the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. So, there are consequences to our sin that go beyond our own human individuality. But there are consequences to our sin that extend to the animals, and to the very ground itself. That's why humans have this idea of there being a haunted house. Ooh, and it's scary, but well, on the other hand, it's just a house. But there's that idea that the very ground is in some way infected by our skin, by our sin. Not our skin, our sin. And that's why it's very important that we take holiness seriously. Verse 8, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. That phrase, this is the account of Noah and his family. Many scholars, biblical scholars, believe that this phrase is an indication that Noah himself is now writing the text. That Noah himself is now saying, okay, this is the account. And we get that because this is the account of Noah and his family. So Moses, who compiled Genesis, is saying these are actually the words that Noah wrote. So we can trust these sources because they were eyewitness sources. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So, he didn't have a son and a daughter. He had 3 sons. And these sons will eventually take their family into the rest of the world after the flood. Alright, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself talking about the sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth taking their people all over the world. And that's where we get all these flood myths from all over the world, because these children will tell their children the stories of the flood, and so down through the ages we'll have all these flood legends and all these flood myths. And it comes from the fact that there was a flood in the days of Noah. So that's why there's all those flood legends, because there was a flood. I'm trying not to get too complicated here. Alright, verse 11. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long. A cubit is from the elbow to the tip of your finger. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof of an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I am going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything will perish. So, in the ark are going to be all these animals, and there are going to be a lot of animals that Noah's not going to need to bring, because they're fish, or they're insects, or they're things that can survive a flood no problem. A lot of plant life. Not going to be a problem for it to be uprooted, its seeds to spread out. In fact, the flood's going to help spread the seeds all over the world. But there are going to be certain animals that Noah is going to have to bring in the ark. In verse 18, God's continuing to talk, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. So it's not like in the movie where the children are little. These sons already have wives with them. They've already started their families. And so it's not like Noah had little children when he went into the ark. In verse 19, you are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. So, this word kind is very significant in this text. It's very significant. And it's significant because he's not talking about species. He's talking about dog kind, cat kind. There's only so many kinds of animals. Many of the scientific commentaries that I've seen talk about, while there are millions and millions of species of animals, you can narrow it down between 5,000 and 8,000 kinds of animals. So you've got the clean animals and you've got the unclean animals. Have we gotten there yet? No. So hold that thought. In verse 21, you are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. So you got to think ahead to what you're going to eat on the ark. And in verse 22, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And we're going on to chapter 7 of Genesis. And the Lord then said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. And also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. You know, again, you see this phrase, kind, kind, kind. So God is not telling Noah, I don't know what's going on with my English today, but Noah. God's telling Noah he needs to take the different kinds of animals into the ark. This isn't going to be the kind of thing where you take millions and millions and millions of birds and millions and millions and millions of kinds of animals. It's not like that. He's just taking the basic kinds. He's taking 7 pairs of the clean animals and 2 pairs of the unclean animals. And he's doing this because after the flood, there's going to be a need to eat. And you're going to need to eat some of these things, and you're going to need to sacrifice some of these animals to God. And so Noah had to prepare for that. You know, we can also see from the way that herd animals are distributed across the world that most herd animals are found in the Eurasian landmass, specifically in what we call the Fertile Crescent. And, you know, just a thought, the reason why most of the herd animals are there is because that's where Noah landed after this flood. He landed in the mountains of Ararat after this flood in the Fertile Crescent. And so, logically, that's where the animals stay. That's where the animals are going to be. God says, 7 days from now, I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. So this is the second revelation from God. God gave his first revelation to Noah, saying, go and build an ark. Noah builds the ark. Now God gives him another revelation and says, 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Verse 6, Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came upon the earth. Again, this is made possible because of the canopy of water, the canopy of ice that was above the earth in the pre-flood days. Verse 7, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Verse 8, pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and of all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days the flood waters came on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, God's being specific. This is the exact day that it happened. If this is so allegorical, if this is so not happening, why is God being so specific in years, in dates, in months, when this flood happened? This is a real account. This is something that God really did. This is something that humankind really suffered through. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, so I want to point out that the flood waters do not come all from the rain. A lot of people have this mistaken notion that it just rained. But that's not true. That's not true at all. And actually, the floodgates of the heavens were opened. That canopy of water came rushing down, probably when a comet hit the canopy or something. But more than that, it says in verse 11 that the springs of the great deep burst forth. So, when the comet hit, there was probably a crack in the subterranean water chambers that exist all over the earth. Even more so at that time than today. And the crack in the subterranean waters just spread all over the earth, and it left a scar on the earth that we can see to this day. In the middle of the Pacific, in the middle of the Atlantic, we can see this ridge, this subterranean ridge, where we can see that the water gushed forth. For more information on that, I'd highly recommend Walt Brown's book, In the Beginning, and some of the videos that Dr. Brown has produced, talking about some of the scientific ways in which the floodwaters spread all over the earth. Verse 12, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And at this time, when Noah's living, the earth didn't get its sustenance from rains, as I mentioned earlier, but on the contrary, the earth got its sustenance from a mist, from the water under the earth. And so all this rain is straight flood. Verse 13, on that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wife and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. So there are 8 persons who are on the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. So Noah didn't have to go out there and capture all these animals, but the animals came to him. And again, we're only talking about the basic kinds of animals. We're not talking about all the species. People who believe very strongly in evolution and macroevolution say that I don't believe in evolution, but that's not true. Actually, I believe in evolution a lot more than they do, because I believe that all the species, of all the plants, of all the birds, of everything that Noah had to take on the ark, all these seeds, everything, they all came from the 5,000 to 8,000 basic kinds of animals and birds that Noah took on the ark. So, the animals going in were male and female. That's going to be important later. Of every living thing, as God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord shut him in. So, if you're ever wondering how the ark was secured, don't worry about it. The Lord shut him in. The Lord sealed the ark. The Lord made the ark secure. For 40 days, the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. Back about 150 years ago, there was like this massive 8-masted wooden ship that was built that proved not to be seaworthy. And so a lot of skeptics have said that a wooden boat this big wouldn't be able to survive. And they point to this 18th century, 19th century example of a wooden ship that couldn't survive. Well, the problem with that is that it was an 8-masted ship. and the bending of the boat was caused by the masts. But Noah's Ark didn't have any masts. It didn't have any means of propelling itself because it wasn't trying to go anywhere. It was just trying to float. And we got to remember that the Lord shut him in. So it was secure. This wasn't necessarily something that humans could do. It wasn't necessarily something that humans could do again, because the Lord shut him in. The Lord made the ark secure. The waters, verse 19, rose greatly on the earth, and all the mountains under the entire heavens were covered. All the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. So, the highest mountain that existed at the time, and I want to emphasize that existed at the time, were covered by more than 15 cubits. And again, a cubit, length from the elbow to the tip of the finger. I believe that Noah's cubit was a lot bigger than mine. You know, archaeology shows that ancient man was a lot bigger than we are today, almost twice as big. Again, I'd refer you to some of the posts from Creation Science Evangelism to get a more scientific understanding of how the flood of Noah happened. I'm here mainly to talk about the text and how it compares with the new movie coming out. Verse 21, every living thing that moved on the land perished, birds, livestock, wild animals, and all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that moved along from the ground, and the birds were wiped out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. So again, out of this passage, I want to remind the audience that only 8 people survived the ark. It wasn't 4 like in the movie, 8 people. But God remembered Noah, starting in chapter 8, Genesis, verse 1. God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark. And he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days the water had gone down. I'm gonna switch over for a second to the King James, because the NIV in this passage doesn't translate it as well as I'd like. Again, verse 2 from the King James, the fountains of the deep and the heavens were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. Verse 3, and the waters returned from off the earth continually. That translation's a lot better, at least in terms of these verses. The floodwater receding created great violence on the earth. It wasn't a steady withdrawal as in the NIV. The King James translate this particular passage in a much better way, because it shows the violence of the moment a lot more accurately. Verse 3, and the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of the 150 days the waters were abated. Verse 4, And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. So, again, I really want to focus on the violence of this moment. The violence of all these waters going about. The violence of the flood. Without having any soil to stop it. This water is just going around and around and around and around and around. And that friction is constantly shaping the topography of the earth. And I want to emphasize this because it's my conviction that the floodwaters did not cover places like Mount Everest, but that Mount Everest just didn't exist yet. But this violent process of the water just flooding the earth, this catastrophic process, is shaping the topography to the point where I don't believe that much of the earth was recognizable. I believe that, landmarks were renamed after old landmarks. For instance, I believe that, Noah and his family, or perhaps their generations, go around saying, there was a Tigris and a Euphrates back in our day, so we'll rename this flood Tigris, we'll rename this one Euphrates. We see the same thing happening in our day, in our history, and in colonial times. There was a place called York in England, and so, I like York. York's a great place, so we'll name this place York. New York, that's how New York got its name. Well, kind of. First it was called New Amsterdam, I think. And then when the English came over, they changed it to York. They like York better, but it's like we got this new feeling, so we'll call it New York. But I think it was originally called New Amsterdam. Anyways, I digress. In verse 6, it says, after 40 days Noah opened a window he had made in the ark, and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. The raven is a carnivorous bird, and so might not have been the best bird to send out forth, because the raven went out and he flew back and forth. And he was like, dude, there's food everywhere, just floating bodies everywhere. This is awesome. I'm going to eat. So the implication, I think, is that he didn't come back. He just flew around until he found a spot to rest in, because he was just in hog heaven, eating all the flesh. Verse 8, Noah wises up, and so he sends out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the earth. But the dove couldn't find anywhere to perch because there was water all over the surface of the earth, so it returned to Noah in the ark. A dove would die rather than eat flesh. Raven doesn't care. He'll just go out, land on a floating body somewhere, and eat it. He's not gonna necessarily come back. But the dove came back because there was nothing to eat. There weren't any plants visible yet. There were only floating bodies everywhere. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So now things are returning to normal. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days and sent out the dove again, but this time it didn't come back. So, at this point, the flood's pretty much over. Verse 13, by the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. Again, I want to point out that these are very specific dates, that these are very specific points of reference, because this really happened, and the author of this account, who I believe is Noah, wants us to know that this really happened. And he wants us to know to the specific day, to the specific time that it happened. Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it. Verse 18, so Noah came out, together with his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives. Again, multiple sons, multiple wives. One son, each wife. Polygamy implications aren't here. Okay. All the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves on the land, came out of the ark, one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans. Even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. Then God blessed Noah, beginning in chapter 9, and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea that are given into your hands. So there aren't as many animals right now. So God needs to make these animals afraid of Noah and his family for their protection, so that they can reproduce after their kind, so that dogs can have dog kind. You know, the dog, the wolf, and the coyote, their ancestor was on this ark. You know, the cat kinds, their ancestor was on the ark. Again, for those concerned that I don't believe in evolution, I probably believe in it more than you do. Verse 3, everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. So, in the antediluvian period, in the period that was before the flood, people were only allowed to eat vegetables. Now God's saying meat's okay to eat. I love meat. I ate bacon for breakfast, and I was grateful. Verse 9:5, chapter 9, verse 5. And for your lifeblood I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each human being too I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made mankind. So God is now establishing capital punishment as his decree for those who would dare to shed the blood of another man. That's why it's important that we take care of murderers permanently so that they can't murder again. I believe that they should be given a chance to repent. Give them 2 or 3 weeks to think about what they did. And then do it. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply on the earth and increase upon it. Go and have lots of kids. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that come out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring the clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the cloud, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Verse 16, whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all the living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on the earth. So the rainbow's a powerful symbol of promise that comes because of the deluge, that comes because of the flood. The rainbow's a promise that God's not going to destroy us again by water. He'll come in judgment again in fire. But that's a Bible study for another day, when Jesus returns and studying things on the end times. But the symbol of the rainbow has been taken in this generation to be a sinful symbol for a perverse lifestyle. And that breaks my heart. But at the same time, we need to remember that the God of love who sent his Son to die for us while we were still sinners, that's how much he loved us while we were still sinners. And so when we see people who use the rainbow for their sinful lifestyle, we shouldn't hate them. We should love them and want to see them saved and set free from their sin. We shouldn't want to see them destroyed. We shouldn't want to see any wicked destroyed. We shouldn't want to see any wicked go to hell. That's why we should be determined to spread the word of God's truth, to spread the word of the Bible that contains the revelation, that contains the inspiration from the words that truly come from God. It's my prayer that you will appreciate the story of the real Noah, and that by looking at the real Noah, you too will come to a greater appreciation for the love that God has for all mankind, most fully through his Son, Jesus Christ. God be with you. Have a good day. Have a good night. Whatever it is when you're watching this, God bless.